The winter of 1872 was a fierce one, defying even the hardiest of travelers. The cold bit cruelly, and the gales howled like restless spirits. Yet, driven by an unwavering sense of duty and compassion, Dr. Claire Waverly, a dedicated physician from Boston, embarked on a journey to the heart of Colorado. Her destination was the remote settlement of Timber Creek, where a dire influenza outbreak threatened to claim the lives of its isolated inhabitants. Claire, accustomed to the bustling streets and well-trodden paths of the city, found herself in unknown territory, both physically and metaphorically. Her role as a caretaker had never demanded more from her than it did now. She traveled alone, her only companions being the steady clip-clop of her horse's hooves and the omnipresent blanket of snow that transformed the landscape into a vast, unending sea of white. The journey was relentless. Each day felt interminable as the snow deepened and the winds grew ever more insistent, whispering secrets that were not meant for human ears. Wrapped in layers of wool and fur, Claire pressed on, driven by the cries for help that had reached her from across the country. Her resolve steeled by the knowledge that lives depended on her, she pressed through the blizzard confit. But nature, indifferent to human resolve, had other plans. One afternoon, as Claire urged her horse onward through a particularly dense forest, the storm hit with a renewed vengeance. Snow fell in blinding sheets, erasing the path ahead and swallowing any familiar landmarks. The temperature plummeted, and Claire struggled to keep her bearings. Her compass, a comforting weight in her pocket, seemed to spin directionlessly, dancing with the winds rather than guiding her through them. The world closed in around her, an impenetrable shroud of white that smothered both sound and sight. Panic clawed at her chest, each breath she drew scraping painfully against the icy air. It was the kind of cold that seeped into the bones and whispered cruel promises of despair. For the first time in her life, Claire, who prided herself on her resourcefulness, felt truly lost. As darkness began to fall, the grim reality of her situation loomed, her hope dwindling with the waning light. The prospect of spending the night exposed, with no shelter against the elements, threatened to consume her with dread. Her thoughts turned to her family, to the patients who needed her, and to dreams that might never be realized. Just as desperation began to eclipse her determination, a shadow emerged from the storm, vague at first, then taking form as it approached. Was it a figment of her imagination, born from her fear and exhaustion? But no, it was real, a figure draped in a heavy coat, moving with purpose through the drifts. The man reached her quickly, his presence a solid contradiction to the faltering world around her. He was tall, with a rugged appearance that spoke of long years spent enduring nature's whims. His eyes, though grave, held a flicker of warmth as he looked at her with understanding. No words needed to convey the urgency of the situation. Without hesitation, he guided Claire from her horse. Her limbs, stiff and near frozen, moved at his insistence. Leaning heavily on him, she allowed herself to be led through the oppressive whiteness. Step by step, they wound through the trees, the man's shoe-footedness guiding them to safety. Soon a cabin loomed ahead, its presence both sudden and comforting. Smoke curled from the chimney, a whisper of warmth against the stark surroundings. Inside, the air was blissfully warm, filled with the rustic scent of burning wood. The contrast was a balm to her senses' comfort after the wild storm outside. Her rescuer wasted no time. He wrapped her in blankets and urged her to sit by the fire. The warmth slowly seeped back into her body, and her trembling subsided. Sitting there, the realization of her narrow escape settled heavily upon her. She was safe, at least for the moment. The cabin was sparse, yet filled with an unexpected warmth, resonating with something beyond its simple furnishings. It was a tranquility she hadn't anticipated, and one she found herself grateful for. Her savior moved quietly, making tea with practiced efficiency, before pausing to introduce himself. "Rowan," he said simply, his voice a low timbre that suited the rugged solemnity of his appearance. His expression was as inscrutable as the silent snow beyond the windows, yet there was a gentleness in his movements and an unspoken understanding of her ordeal. Claire was about to express her gratitude when she spotted a small figure peeking from behind the wood-stacked walls. A girl, no older than 7, with wide eyes that seemed to hold worlds. The child retreated shyly when noticed, disappearing like a wisp of smoke. "Elsie," Rowan explained quietly, observing her gaze. She prefers to communicate in her own way." Claire nodded, the encounter leaving a pebble of unease in her thoughts. The girl's silence was striking, yet her presence added a new layer to the mysterious circumstances that had brought Claire to this sanctuary. As Rowan turned his attention to their supper, Claire allowed herself to relax, knowing questions could wait. The cabin's cocooned warmth, the storm's distant fury, and the enigmatic lives of her saviors all swirled together, leaving Claire with a mingled sense of gratitude and curiosity. As she settled into the night, thoughts of Timber Creek and its ailing souls lingered, whispers urging her forward. But for now, she was in the heart of the storm and not alone. The brisk wind howled like a lost spirit, seeking a path home, as snow descended with relentless determination, a celestial curtain obscuring the world outside. Inside Rowan's modest mountain cabin, the atmosphere was a poignant contrast. All was hushed, save for the occasional crackle of the flickering hearth. Claire sat on a rough-hewn chair, her hands still trembling from cold as she clasped a steaming mug of herbal tea, a concoction of wild herbs Rowan had brewed with practiced ease. Her surroundings were sparse but comforting. The walls were adorned with rustic charm, a harmony of weathered wood and simple craftsmanship. Shelves lined with oddities, jars of herbs and vials of tinctures, spoke of a life lived in communion with nature. Yet, what caught Claire's eye and held her attention was a small, makeshift table beneath the only window, where Elsie sat with paper and charcoal in hand, her brow furrowed in concentration. Elsie was a slip of a girl, petite and ethereal, her aura intertwined with the mysteries that enveloped the cabin as seamlessly as the snow blanketed the world outside. She had not spoken a word since Claire's arrival, but she communicated profoundly through her art. Each stroke of charcoal on paper seemed to pull from some deep reservoir, past the veil of silence, to narrate a story trapped within her. Claire watched the child, her heart heavy with unspoken questions. What horrors had Elsie witnessed before finding sanctuary in this remote refuge? Her drawings, Claire realized, were not just simple childhood scrolls. They were windows into the past, depicting scenes macabre and harrowing, shadowy figures looming menacingly, a faceless silhouette reaching with clawed hands, an empty room cloaked in darkness. "Does she ever speak?" Claire asked Rowan, more to break the silence than expecting an immediate reply. Her voice was hushed, as if afraid of shattering the fragile peace within the room. "Not since I found her," Rowan answered from across the room, his tone a gentle rumble that matched the calming crackling of the fire. "I suspect she's seen more than any child should. But her silence is not a lack of strength. She communicates in her way." His explanation gave Claire a measure of respite, yet she couldn't shake the unease that curled like smoke in her chest. She was a physician, trained to diagnose and heal, yet in the face of this child's mute suffering, she felt helpless. "Have you tried to help her?" Claire ventured. Rowan's eyes, deep as the forest shadows from which he had emerged to save her, met hers with quiet assurance. "I have given her space and time. She trusts me enough to draw, and in that, there is hope." "Forcing words would break what little sanctuary she's managed to build," he explained. His understanding seemed rooted in a profound empathy, a silent acknowledgement that healing often defies words. Over the following days, as the storm howled its wrathful lullaby outside, Claire found herself drawn increasingly to Elsie. She began to sit by the child as she sketched, offering gentle smiles and quiet companionship. She did not push, instead allowing Elsie to dictate the pace of their interaction. In those silent hours, Claire began to truly see. The drawings, once dark impressions of foreboding, slowly shifted in tone. Shapes grew less ominous, forms more defined, as if releasing a part of their captive horror with each charcoal line. She started to notice glimpses of Hoppermid. The stormy seas captured on paper were islands of calm, a testament to resilience and the promise of eventual refuge. And perhaps, Claire mused, this was as much a journey for her as it was for Elsie. Trust was a fragile thing, like a fledgling bird hesitant to leave the nest. Her suspicions toward Rowan had not completely abated, yet there was a gradual thawing, a subtle dismantling of prejudice. Rowan's quiet strength, his unwavering patience with Elsie, spoke to his true character, challenging Claire's initial judgments and softening the edges of her skepticism. Elsie's drawings became threads weaving the inhabitants of the cabin into a tentative tapestry of understanding. Each piece completed was a story left to the imagination, a conversation through imagery. Claire found herself reflecting on the nature of a child's art as therapy, and the silent plea it carried for connection and safety. As the storm began to relent, its fury spent over the passing days. Rays of sunlight pierced the monochrome world outside. With it, the oppressive atmosphere within the cabin began to lift. In the final stretch of their enforced solitude, something pivotal occurred. Elsie, finishing another drawing, looked up at Claire, meeting her gaze fully for the first time. Those eyes, wide pools of untold stories, held a question, perhaps silently asking if the world beyond the drawings was safe to explore once more. Claire, deeply moved, reached out and tucked an unruly strand of hair behind Elsie's ear, a simple gesture of comfort and assurance. "Whenever you're ready," Claire whispered, her words a promise. Rowan, standing by the window, caught Claire's eye and nodded, a silent agreement that healing-like trust is a journey marked by patience and compassion. Later, as the world outside began to slowly awaken from its wintry slumber, one of Elsie's drawings was left unfinished. This one showed a cabin identical to Rowan's, bathed in the golden light of a setting sun, with 3 figures in the foreground, all hands interlinked, facing a new horizon. It was a beginning. The wind howled mercilessly outside the small log cabin, its wrath palpable as it whipped snow across the windows, obscuring the view beyond with sheets of white. Inside, the dimly lit room swayed in rhythm with the whistling gale, as if the storm's breath set everything adrift. Claire Waverly stood close to the smouldering hearth, her eyes fixed on the flickering flames, though her mind was elsewhere, tempest of conflicting emotions and unanswered questions. Rowan, her enigmatic rescuer, moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency. Though he spoke sparingly, his actions were deliberate and gentle. It was clear he had built a life for himself in this isolated haven, away from prying eyes and judgmental whispers. Yet, his every move seemed to haunt Claire, feeding the gnawing suspicion that had settled in her stomach since her arrival. It was the child, Elsie, who stalked her thoughts most fervently. The drawing she had discovered, dark, twisted lines scrawled across coarse paper, evoked a chill deeper than any winter wind could muster. Images of monstrous figures and looming shadows spoke of a past shrouded in terror, seen through the eyes of innocence stained by cruelty. Claire's medical training had taught her to recognize trauma's silent call for help. Elsie's art cried out with such a call. Claire recalled her first encounter with the girl, a fleeting gaze, eyes wide and watchful, but lips sealed tight. She felt the pull of the child's unspoken story, a mystery mingled with pain and fear that Claire felt compelled to unravel. Yet, for every step towards understanding, she found herself retreated by Rowan's guarded nature and Elsie's silent world. Was he truly her savior, as he claimed, or the architect of her nightmares? The cabin's ambient warmth did little to soothe Claire's rising apprehension. She turned from the fire, seeking the solitude of her thoughts, only to find Rowan's presence looming a silhouette against the dance of shadows. His gaze met hers, a quiet inquiry lingering in his eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked, voice gruff, yet infused with a genuine care that Claire couldn't easily dismiss. She hesitated, each word a precarious bridge over the chasm of her doubts. "Elsie's drawings, ... they're disturbing. They speak of things no child should have to witness." Rowan's expression darkened, a flicker of pained understanding breaking through his stoic facade. "Her past is not one I would wish upon anyone," he said softly. "But I assure you, I had no part in it. I found her, alone and terrified, and I couldn't turn away." Though his words resonated with sincerity, Claire's skepticism remained unyielding. "And yet, you're hiding. If you're innocent, why not seek help?" "Help," Rowan repeated with a grim chuckle, a sound devoid of amusement. "Do you think I haven't tried? The world isn't quick to absolve those like me. Once you're branded a criminal, the truth becomes irrelevant." Claire's heart wavered, torn between the stark truth of his statement and the ever-present fear of being deceived. "I want to believe you, Rowan," she confessed, her voice a whisper over the crackling fire. Before he could respond, Elsie appeared, her small frame backlit by the hearth's glow. She held another drawing, this one depicting 3 figures united beneath a blazing sun, a stark contrast to the darkness that overshadowed earlier pieces. With hesitant steps, she approached Claire, extending the picture with a solemnity that belied her age. Claire took the drawing, feeling the weight of Elsie's intent in her offering. Were these sketches a plea for understanding, a testament to a bond yet unformed? Her heart lurched at the possibility, carving through her doubts like a ray of sun piercing the storm-laden clouds. Rowan moved to stand alongside them, his presence a quiet strength. "She doesn't talk much," he explained, his tone softening. But she draws. It's her way of creating a world she can control, a world where hope triumphs. As Claire studied the drawing in her hands, a seed of empathy took root. Amidst the confusion and fear, she felt the stirrings of a connection burgeoning between both Rowan and Elsie, a connection forged in resilience, transcending the shadows cast by past and present. Outside, the blizzard lost some of its fury, the wind's roar tapering to a distant wail. The cabin's walls, once confining, became a protective cocoon, sheltering them from both storm and suspicion. Claire realized that her journey held a different meaning than she had initially understood. It was not merely facing the harshness of nature, but confronting the unknown within herself. Over the next few days, as the storm gradually ceded its control over the landscape, Claire's perspective shifted like the melting snow. She learned the nuances of their lives, Rowan's unwavering dedication to safeguarding Elsie, despite the world's cruelty, and Elsie's quiet resilience, a strength born from survival and reclaiming innocence. The shadow of doubt, slowly retreating, uncaged her heart, aligning her perception with the truth, unhindered by fear. Claire stood at a crossroads, where judgment and compassion met an intersection of vulnerability and trust. She found, at its heart, an unexpected journey not bound by destination but defined by the courage to embrace an uncertain path paved by empathy and understanding. Her fears, once formidable as the winter storm, relinquished their hold, revealing a newfound clarity. The path ahead lay uncharted, the horizon indistinguishable through the remnants of winter's fury, yet Claire remained unafraid. In Rowan and Elsie, she found more than allies. She discovered a family forged by fate's guiding hand. And as the world outside slowly thawed, so did the barriers within, a promise of new beginnings unfurling with the promise of spring. It was a journey not only in the heart of the storm, but into the depths of what it meant to care, to believe, and ultimately, to love. Claire awoke to the rhythmic sound of logs crackling in the hearth, the orange glow casting flickering shadows across the rough wooden walls of Rowan's cabin. The storm outside showed no sign of relenting, winds howling like restless spirits. Beside the hearth, Rowan sat quietly whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease, deep in concentration, or perhaps in an effort to avoid the questions he knew would come. It had been 3 days since Claire had stumbled into his life, and every hour spent in this secluded refuge only amplified the tension between gratitude and suspicion. Rowan had provided shelter, food, and warmth, yet Claire couldn't shake the discomfort seeded by Elsie's hauntingly mature drawings. Each sketch was a window into a tormenting past, stories conveyed through chaotic lines and darkened scrolls. Elise sat nearby, absently braiding strands of yarn, her presence a silent reminder of unanswered questions. "Rowan," Claire began, the urgency in her voice sharper than she intended, "we need to speak about Elsie." Rowan paused, his knife still against the wood, before meeting her gaze. His eyes, though weary, held a depth of sincerity that put Claire at momentary ease. "I figured it would be time," he replied, setting his carving aside. "I owe you an explanation." He stood, gathering his thoughts as he moved to the window, staring out into the swirling veil of snow. Claire watched him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the burden of a story unshed. "It was late autumn when I found her," Rowan began, his voice low, carrying the weight of the tale. "I had been tracking game through the forest, preparing for the winter months, when I stumbled upon a group of men, unsavory types. They were at first. I didn't think much of it. Strangers passed through these woods occasionally." Claire tensed, sensing the dark turn the story was about to take. Rowan continued, his voice stronger now, colored by the anger and regret of that day. "They were arguing by the river. I couldn't see clearly what, but then I heard it, a child's cry, cut through the air like a knife." Rowan's hands clenched into fists, and Claire saw a flicker of the fierce protector beneath his quiet exterior. "I crept closer, hidden by the brush, and that's when I saw her. Elsie, tired and terrified, clearly a captive. The men were discussing how best to sell her." The cabin seemed to grow colder at his words, and Claire took a deep breath, bracing herself against the horror of the revelation. Her heart ached for Elsie, for whatever nightmares she had endured. "What did you do?" Claire's question was barely a whisper, the crackling fire a backdrop to the weight of Rowan's memory. "I acted without thinking," Rowan confessed, almost apologetic. "I couldn't let them hurt her. So, I waited till nightfall, and when they had gathered around their campfire, I snuck in and cut her bonds." But we weren't careful enough. They heard us." He paused, perhaps reliving the mad, breathless dash through the woods with Elsie in his arms, the shouts and curses of her pursuers echoing in the night. "We ran until we couldn't anymore, until my lungs burned and it felt like my heart might burst. But we lost them in the forest." His voice grew quieter, a shadow of regret overlaying his words. "I brought her here, and we've been hiding since. But someone framed me for those men's crimes, accused me of being part of their gang, said that I kidnapped her. That's why we can't leave, not yet." Claire sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Rowan's confession. Emotions twisted within her, sympathy for his plight, anger at the unjust system hounding him, and a growing belief in his innocence. Yet one question lingered, edging its way out of her confusion. "Why didn't you seek help sooner? Go to the authorities?" Rowan laughed, a sound devoid of humor. What would they believe? A drifter's word against perfectly laid evidence. "I didn't stand a chance. My only proof is her." He looked at Elsie with a tenderness that was hard to misinterpret. "But she wasn't speaking, until you came." It was then that Elsie looked up, meeting both their eyes. Slowly, she picked up a charcoal pencil and dragged it across the surface of the paper with purpose. Intrigued, Claire leaned closer, watching the shapes take form, the staccato strokes arranging into a likeness, not of trauma, but of the three of them, Rowan, Elsie, and herself, standing in a line, holding hands beneath a clear sky. It was a simple drawing, yet it spoke of newfound hope and a longing for belonging. Tears welled unbidden in Claire's eyes. She reached out and touched the drawing with a trembling hand. In that moment, all her doubts eased into clarity. Rowan wasn't just Elsie's guardian. He was her savior, her steadfast protector in a world gone awry. "Thank you for trusting me with the truth," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "We can't erase the past, but maybe I can help clear your name. We can find a way to make them see what you did was right." Rowan nodded, a trace of relief softening his features. "I hoped you might say that. The storm will pass soon, and then we can figure out a way to set things right." As they stood there, united by shared conviction and purpose, the cabin's warmth wrapped around them like a cocoon, sheltering them from the raging tempest outside. Claire realized that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to stand together in spite of it. With the storm slowly abating, the path ahead remained fraught with uncertainty and challenge. But Claire no longer faced it alone by joining forces with Rowan and Elsie. She had found a cause worth fighting for, and possibly a new family forged in the heart of the storm. Inside Rowan's rustic cabin, the world was muted by the thick layers of snow that continued to blanket the outside world. The wind howled through the mountain passes like a restless spirit, but inside the cabin, all was still. Claire sat by the flickering fire, her mind a turbulent sea of thoughts and emotions. Her initial wariness of Rowan had turned to something more nuanced, more complicated, guided by the small glimpses of truth he had shared. He was not the villain she had first imagined, but rather a man caught in a desperate set of circumstances, just like her. Rowan was seated across from her, his eyes occasionally meeting hers, as he fed wood into the crackling flames. The dancing light accentuated his sharp features, creating shadows that heightened the enigmatic aura surrounding him. Elsie, the little girl who had remained mostly silent since Claire's arrival, was curled up with a blanket near the fire. Her drawings, scattered around, were still haunting but had begun to show flashes of color and hope, a testament, perhaps, to the healing environment Rowan had provided. Claire felt the weight of her decision lying heavy on her heart. Should she trust Rowan, a man who, despite the circumstances, had shown nothing but kindness since their encounter? Or should she heed the warnings of the storybook illustrations drawn by a traumatized child? "I know it's a lot to take in," Rowan finally said, breaking the silence. His voice, steady yet soft, seemed to blend harmoniously with the crackling of the fire. "I can only imagine what you're thinking." Claire wrapped her arms around herself, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I want to believe you," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's difficult to just forget what I've seen and felt." Rowan nodded, leaning back so that the shadows softened around him. "I understand. All I ask is that you give it time. Sometimes it's hard to see past what the world wants us to see. But if you look closely, you might find the truth hidden beneath." His words hung in the air, an invitation, a pleading for understanding, and a hint of the pain that lay beneath his calm demeanor. Claire glanced at Elsie, who was now looking at her with wide, trusting eyes. The girl had seen horrors that no child should, yet here she was, flourishing under Rowan's guardianship. "The night I met Elsie," Rowan continued, his gaze distant, as if peering back through time, "I had been on a supply run. When I saw the state those monsters had left her in, I couldn't turn away. I did what I had to do, saved her from a fate worse than death. And in that moment, my life changed forever." Claire listened intently, piecing together the fragments of his story. The anger and resolve in Rowan's voice were real, underpinned by a genuine desire to protect and heal. Her distrust began to waver, supplanted by a growing empathy. The storm outside showed no signs of abating, mirroring the internal squall raging in Claire's heart. Could she trust this man who was both stranger and savior? Her thoughts drifted to the community waiting for her. She had made a promise to aid them, but now she realized she was engaged in a different kind of healing, one that involved broken souls rather than bodies. Rowan stood, stepping closer, his presence simultaneously comforting and unnerving. "I never asked you to believe what I've said," he admitted, "only to judge me by my actions and what you see here. I trust you to make the right decision." The humility in his voice struck a chord within her. It was as if he had laid his soul bare, a gesture not easily given. Claire felt the cautious walls around her heart cracking. She understood, now. Trusting Rowan was not just about believing his story, but also about acknowledging the truth of their shared experience. Truth that resided not in words but in actions. "I'm frightened," she confessed, tears gathering at the edges of her vision, frightened of making the wrong decision. Rowan reached out, his hand hovering above hers in a silent offering of comfort. Claire hesitated, then slowly, deliberately, placed her hand in his. The warmth of his touch was a lifeline, grounding her in the midst of uncertainty. "We will figure it out together, Claire," Rowan assured her, his grip gentle yet firm. "Whatever the storm throws at us, we face it as one." As the fire crackled, the tension in the room eased. In the background, Elsie continued to draw, her pencil strokes more fluid and expressive, the harsh edges softening as if reflecting the change in the cabin's emotional climate. Trusting Rowan was an act of faith, Claire realized, a leap into the unknown. It was about choosing love over fear, connection over isolation. The realization brought her a sense of peace, and with it, a faint glimmer of hope that they could overcome whatever lay ahead. The storm outside persisted, but inside the humble cabin nestled amid the Colorado Rockies, warmth and light prevailed. The bonds of trust, once tentative and fragile, were now beginning to solidify, setting the foundation for what might become a shared journey, not just one of survival, but of healing and love. As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered landscape with hues of pink and gold, Claire knew she had made her choice. With Rowan and Elsie by her side, she was ready to step into whatever future awaited them beyond the winter's grip, hand in hand, heart in heart. Thus, in the heart of the storm, Claire found the resilience to embrace an unforeseen destiny, trusting that love, indeed, was the guiding light that could weather any tempest. The relentless snowstorm that had once threatened to bury them under its icy weight was now a thing of the past. The wintry landscape, previously a sea of endless white, began to reveal hints of the vibrant world underneath. Claire stood by the small window of Rowan's cabin, watching the first signs of melting snow and feeling a deep sense of renewed hope. Rowan joined her, his presence a comforting shadow by her side. His eyes followed hers, gazing out at the slowly revealing earth. "Spring will come soon," he said, his voice a warm, low rumble that echoed around the snug wooden walls. "And with it, perhaps, a new chapter for all of us." Claire turned her gaze to Elsie, who sat cross-legged by the hearth. The child was sketching again, but her drawings were different now. Gone were the dark, haunted shapes, replaced by bright swirls and hopeful lines. Each stroke of her pencil was a testament to her healing heart, a narrative of warmth, replacing the chill of her past. "She's opening up," Claire observed softly, a note of wonder in her voice. "I dared not hope for this after everything she's been through." Rowan nodded, a mixture of relief and pride etched on his rugged features. "You've had a hand in that, Claire. Your patience, your kindness. You've been a light for her, in a way I could never be." Claire shook her head modestly, but her heart soared at his words. She had come to understand that both Rowan and Elsie had been in need of saving, each in their own way, and that she had been just as much a part of this journey as they had been for her. As the thaw continued outside, life inside the cabin found its rhythm. Days flowed into one another with the ease of true companionship. Claire and Rowan would venture into the woods, gathering provisions for the coming spring. Their walks were filled with stories of the past and dreams for the future, the connection between them growing stronger and more undeniable with each passing day. Claire found herself marveling at Rowan's resilience. Despite the unjust accusations that had forced him into isolation, he harbored no bitterness. Instead, he spoke of hopes for justice and the possibility of returning to a world where he wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder. One afternoon, as they trekked back to the cabin with freshly caught fish, Claire broached a subject that had been lingering on her mind. "Rowan, once winter is truly over, what will you do? Will you try to prove your innocence?" He paused, considering the weight of her question. "I've thought of it," he admitted, "but it's a long and uncertain road. I'd need to find the right people willing to listen." Claire nodded, her heart tightening at the thought of a future where their paths might diverge. She realized how deeply entwined her feelings were with this man who had once been a stranger. "If you need someone by your side, I'd like to help," she said, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. Rowan looked at her, his eyes softening. "Your being here already means more than words can say, Claire. I never thought I'd find someone who'd believe in me, especially without knowing all the facts." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, unspoken truths passed between them, hearts reaching out across a chasm that fear and doubt had once widened. As the weeks passed, the cabin brimmed with a newfound vibrancy. Wildflowers began to push through the damp earth outside, mirroring the blooming emotions Claire felt within. She, Rowan, and Elsie formed a peculiar but loving family, strengthened by the trials they had faced together. The mornings were filled with learning. Claire taught Elsie to read and write, the child's silence slowly replaced with laughter and the tentative formation of words. Rowan, who once had been a solitary figure, lost in the wilderness, now found himself part of a world rich with conversation and companionship. On a particularly bright afternoon, as sunlight danced upon the thawing ground, Rowan took Claire's hand as they walked. "This land, it's harsh but beautiful," he said, his voice filled with reverence, "much like the journey we've been on." Claire glanced at him, her heart full. "It's one I wouldn't trade for anything," she confessed, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. He stopped, turning to face her fully. "Claire, when this is all behind us, I mean, if it ever is, would you consider staying? Not here, in the middle of nowhere," he added hurriedly, "but wherever the road leads, together." Emotion welled up within her, a surge of happiness mixed with relief. "Yes," she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. Together, the promise of new beginnings, of shared tomorrows, wrapped itself around them like a second skin. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable melted away, as surely as the snow at their feet. And so, with spring on the horizon, Claire, Rowan, and Elsie stepped forward into the light, leaving the shadows of the storm behind, united by love and hope, ready to navigate whatever the next chapter of their journey would bring.